The sky outside was dark as a bruise. My mother-in-law clutched the old canvas bag containing exactly $1 million, my sweat, tears, and youth, like she feared a robbery. Then, as she turned away, the teller locked eyes with me and slid a note across the glass. It warned me to run. I did not hesitate. I clutched my stomach, faked a violent illness, and fled before the trap could snap shut. My name is Harper Thomas. And until 10 minutes ago, I thought I was a good wife. I thought I was a partner in a marriage that just happened to be going through a rough patch, a turbulence zone that we would eventually clear. But as I stood under the awning of the Silvergate Community Bank, watching the sky turn the color of a fresh bruise, I realized I wasn't a partner. I was livestock, and I was being led to the slaughterhouse. The air was heavy, saturated with a storm that refused to break. Beside me, my mother-in-law, Marlene Crow, adjusted her grip on the old fraying canvas tote bag. To anyone passing by on the sidewalk, she looked like a grandmother carrying knitting supplies, or perhaps a casserole for a sick neighbor. But I knew better. Inside that bag sat exactly $1 million in cash. It was the liquidation of my grandmother's estate, the sale of my first design studio, and the entirety of my savings from a decade of 70-hour work weeks. It was my life, converted into paper, and Marlene was holding it like she had birthed it herself. "Move it, Harper," Marlene snapped, her voice low but cutting through the humid air. "We need to get this into the high-yield account before 3 in the afternoon. You know Grant gets anxious when things aren't settled by close of business." "I can carry it, Marlene," I said, reaching for the strap. It was a reflex, a phantom limb sensation of needing to protect what was mine. She swatted my hand away, a quick, sharp motion like she was disciplining a toddler. "Don't be ridiculous. You're shaking. Look at you. You'll drop it in a puddle or let someone snatch it right out of your hands. You've never been good with pressure." "Harper, that is why Grant asked me to handle the logistics. Now, come on." She marched toward the glass doors, the automatic sensors parting them with a mechanical hiss. I followed, swallowing the lump of bile rising in my throat. The bank was freezing, the air conditioning blasting at a temperature that felt designed to preserve dead bodies. It was quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies the sound of shoes squeaking on polished tile. Marlene bypassed the empty waiting chairs and the velvet ropes, heading straight for window 2. She had a way of moving through the world that suggested she owned the pavement she walked on. She slammed the canvas bag onto the granite counter with a heavy thud that made the security guard by the door look up from his phone. The teller behind the glass was a woman named Elena Parkhurst. I read the name on her magnetic badge. She had dark hair pulled back into a severe, professional bun, and her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and unsmiling. She didn't give us the customer service beam I was used to. Instead, her gaze lingered on me for a second too long, studying my face as if she were trying to recall where she had seen a mugshot. "We need to open a 12-month certificate of deposit," Marlene announced, her voice booming in the quiet lobby. She didn't ask. She ordered. "And I want it under the senior tier bracket, the one with the 4.5% yield. It needs to be in my name to qualify for the age requirement. Obviously." I flinched. That had been the argument all morning. Grant had insisted that putting the money in Marlene's name was just a technicality, a smart financial move to squeeze out an extra fraction of a percentage point in interest. "It's for the family." "Babe," he had said, kissing my forehead while his eyes checked his watch. "Mom gets the senior rates. We just sign a beneficiary form later. It's free money." "Ma'am, for an amount this size, we usually recommend an appointment with a relationship manager," Elena said, her hands resting flat on her keyboard. She wasn't looking at Marlene. She was looking at me again. "We don't need a manager to sell us products we don't want," Marlene retorted. Unzipping the canvas bag, the smell of old money, musty paper and ink, wafted up. "We have cash. We want the certificate. Simple transaction. Start counting." Elena hesitated. I saw a flicker of something behind her professional mask. Was it annoyance? Concern? She reached for the bundles of cash Marlene began stacking on the counter. feeding them into the bill counter to her right. The machine whirred to life, a rapid-fire sound that echoed like a deck of cards being shuffled by a giant. I stood there, feeling small, feeling like a child watching the adults talk about her future. The numbers on the digital display climbed. 100,000, 200,000. My stomach twisted. Suddenly, Marlene let out a sharp gasp. She clutched her midsection, her face twisting into a grimace that looked theatrically pained. "Oh, heavens," she muttered, bending slightly at the waist. "That lunch, excuse me, I need to use the ladies' room. Immediately." She turned to me, her eyes hard and commanding, dropping the act for a split second. "Watch the count. Harper, don't let your eyes wander. If a single bill goes missing, it is on your head." Before I could answer, she was speed-walking toward the back of the lobby, her heels clicking aggressively against the floor. I was alone, just me, the rhythmic noise of the money counter, and the teller. The machine stopped. I looked up, expecting Elena to reach for the next stack. She didn't. She hit a button on her side of the glass, and the whirring noise died completely. The silence that rushed back into the space was deafening. Elena looked left, toward the manager's office, then right, scanning the empty lobby. Then, with a movement so fluid and practiced it chilled me, she slid a small, folded piece of yellow receipt paper under the glass partition. It stopped right against my knuckles. I stared at it. "Read it," Elena whispered. Her lips barely moved. "Don't look at me. Read it." My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird desperate to escape. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, pressed hard into the thermal paper. "Run. Account flagged. Call this." Below the words was a phone number scrawled in blue ink. I looked up, my breath catching in a hitch that hurt my chest. Elena was already back to typing on her keyboard. Her face composed into a mask of absolute boredom, but her eyes were screaming. They were wide, urgent, pleading. "What?" I mouthed. No sound coming out. "Take the paper," she hissed, not looking up from her screen. "Put it in your pocket, now." I crumbled the paper into my palm, my fingers trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I shoved it deep into the pocket of my jeans. "Why?" I whispered. Elena leaned forward slightly, pretending to straighten a stack of brochures. "Run," she breathed. Footsteps echoed from the corridor leading to the restrooms. Marlene was coming back. Panic, cold and electric, surged through my veins. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was clarity. For months, I had felt a low-level hum of anxiety, a suspicion that I was being managed, gaslit, and maneuvered. I had ignored it because I wanted to believe in my husband. I wanted to believe I had a family. But strangers don't risk their jobs to warn you unless the danger is lethal. Strangers don't tell you to run unless they see the wolf standing right behind you. Marlene was 10 feet away. I could see her smoothing her skirt, her face rearranging itself from annoyance back to superiority. I had 3 seconds. If I stayed, I signed the papers. If I signed the papers, the money was gone. If the money was gone, I had a feeling I would be next. I let out a groan. It started low in my throat and rose to a wail. I doubled over, clutching my abdomen with both hands, dropping my purse to the floor with a crash. "Harper?" Marlene's voice was sharp, suspicious. "Oh, God!" I screamed, squeezing my eyes shut. "It hurts. It's bursting." I fell to my knees, making sure to block her path to the counter, creating chaos. The security guard took a step forward. Elena stood up behind the glass, playing her part. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "My appendix!" I yelled, gasping for air, channeling every ounce of fear I felt into the performance. "I think it ruptured. I need a hospital. Now!" Marlene froze. She looked at the money on the counter, then at me, then back at the money. The greed in her eyes was warring with the public spectacle I was creating. "Harper, get up. Don't be dramatic. We just need 5 minutes to—" "I'm dying," I shrieked, scrambling to my feet, stumbling backward toward the door. "I can't breathe. I have to go." I didn't wait for her permission. I didn't wait for her to grab the bag. I turned and bolted. I hit the glass doors with my shoulder, bursting out into the humid, dark afternoon. The air felt thick, but it tasted like freedom. A yellow taxi was idling at the red light on the corner. I didn't check for traffic. I sprinted across the asphalt, waving my arms like a maniac. Taxi! I threw the back door open and dove inside just as the light turned green. Drive! I yelled at the driver, a startled man with a thick beard. Just drive. Go. Where to? He asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. Anywhere but here, I gasped, slumping down in the seat so I wouldn't be visible through the window. North. Just head north, as the car pulled away. I risked one glance back. Marlene was standing on the sidewalk, the canvas bag clutched to her chest. She wasn't looking at me with concern. She was screaming, her mouth a black hole of rage, her finger pointing at the receding taxi. She looked like a demon whose contract had just been voided. I sank back against the vinyl seat, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I reached into my pocket and touched the crumpled piece of yellow paper. I had run. I had taken $1 million out of that bank. I had abandoned my mother-in-law. But as the bank disappeared into the gray distance, the terrifying question wasn't what I had left behind. It was what I had been sleeping next to. I wasn't just running from a bank transaction. I was running from my life. And I had a terrible feeling that the chase had only just begun. To understand the terror that propelled me out of those bank doors, you have to understand the silence of the morning that preceded it. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, pressurized quiet of a house where everyone is performing a role, and the script has been written by someone else. The day had begun at 5:30 in the morning with the aggressive roar of a vacuum cleaner. My mother-in-law, Marlene, did not clean to sanitize. She cleaned to conquer. I lay in bed, listening to the nozzle banging against the baseboards downstairs. A rhythmic thudding that felt like a gavel striking a judge's bench. She was already awake, already armed, already taking possession of the space. When I finally walked down the stairs, the scent of bleach was strong enough to burn the inside of my nose. Marlene was standing in the center of the living room, fully dressed in a stiff charcoal suit that looked more appropriate for a courtroom sentencing than a bank errand. "You are late," she said. Not looking at me, she was wiping down a perfectly clean granite countertop. Money does not wait for people who sleep in. Harper. "It is 7 in the morning, Marlene," I replied, my voice thick with sleep. "The bank does not even open until 9. "Preparation is part of the transaction," she snapped. Then I saw it, the canvas bag. It was sitting on the kitchen island, next to Grant's untouched bowl of oatmeal. It looked innocuous, just a beige tote bag I had used for groceries 100 times, but the way it sat there, isolated, drew the eye like a black hole. Inside were the stacks of cash we had withdrawn over the last 3 days from various smaller accounts. Consolidating everything, $1 million, my husband, Grant, walked into the kitchen adjusting his silk tie. He looked immaculate. Usually, on days involving significant financial movements, Grant was a nervous wreck. He would check the paperwork 3 times, pace the floor, and insist on driving us himself to ensure nothing went wrong. Today, however, he was cool, detached, almost breezy. "Morning, babe," he said, pecking me on the cheek. His lips felt dry. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at the bag. "Are you ready to go?" I asked him, reaching for the coffee pot. "I can't make it," Grant said, checking his watch, a gold timepiece I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. "I have that breakfast meeting with the new developers downtown. Huge opportunity. Mom knows what she is doing. She will handle the deposit." I paused, the coffee mug halfway to my mouth. "You are not coming? Grant, this is our entire life savings. This is the capital for the expansion. You always handle the deposits." "Mom offered to help so I could take this meeting," Grant said, his voice taking on that smooth, reasonable tone he used when he was managing a difficult client. "Besides, with the senior interest rates she can get on a 12-month certificate of deposit. We are looking at an extra $4,000 or $5,000 a year in passive income. It is just smart math. Harper, do not overthink it. Marlene stepped forward then. Her movements sharp. She picked up the canvas bag. She didn't hold it by the straps. She clutched it against her chest, wrapping both arms around it in a tight embrace. It wasn't the protective stance of someone guarding a family treasure from thieves. It was the covetous grip of someone who had finally gotten their hands on something they believed belonged to them all along. "Let's go," Marlene commanded. "I want to be first in line." The car ride to the bank was a masterclass in psychological suffocation. The sky outside was turning a sickly shade of gray, threatening a storm that wouldn't break, mirroring the atmosphere inside the sedan. Marlene drove. She always drove. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands folded in my lap, looking out at the passing suburbs of Cincinnati. "You know," Marlene said, her voice suddenly dripping with a saccharine sweetness that was far more terrifying than her usual bark. "Grant and I were talking last night. We think it is best if the account stays in my name permanently, not just for the interest rate, but for asset protection." I turned to look at her. Asset protection? From whom? "The world is a litigious place. Harper," she said, her eyes fixed on the road but her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "And let's be honest, you have never been particularly sharp with numbers. Remember that tax penalty 2 years ago? Grant had to work overtime for 3 weeks to fix that mess." The memory stung. Exactly as she intended. I felt the familiar flush of shame. "That was a filing error by the accountant. Marlene, not me." "Grant protects you," she interrupted, her voice hardening, the sweetness evaporating instantly. "He takes the blame because he is a good husband, but we both know you are the creative one, not the pragmatic one. This money, this $1 million, it is too important to be left to chance, or to incompetence." She let the insult hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. I looked out the window, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. For the last year. This had been the dynamic, a slow erosion of my confidence, a constant chipping away at my reality. I thought about the paperwork. In the last 6 months, the number of documents Grant had asked me to sign had tripled. He would always present them late at night, when I was exhausted from the studio, or right as we were rushing out the door for a dinner reservation. "Just sign here, babe. It is just an insurance update. Sign here. It is just a routine modification for the mortgage. Sign here. It is just a liability waiver for the renovation." I had signed them all. I had signed them because I loved him. I had signed them because my mother had taught me that marriage was about trust, and questioning your husband over every single piece of paper was a sign of a rot in the foundation. "We are doing this for the family," Marlene said, cutting through my thoughts. "Family is the only thing that matters. You do understand that, don't you, Harper? The money is safer with me." She wasn't asking. She was telling. And the way she said safer didn't sound like she meant safe from the market or safe from taxes. It sounded like she meant safe from me. "I suppose," I whispered, my voice sounding small in the enclosed space of the car. "Good," she said. "Then when we get to the teller, let me do the talking. You just stand there and look pretty. That is what you are good at." My stomach gave a violent lurch. It wasn't just nerves. It was a visceral, physical rejection of the situation. My body was reacting to a threat that my brain was still trying to rationalize away. I felt a cramp tighten my abdomen, hard and sharp. We pulled into the parking lot of Silvergate Community Bank. The building loomed gray and imposing against the dark sky. Marlene put the car in park and turned to me. She didn't smile. She looked at me with an expression of absolute appraisal, as if I were a piece of furniture she was deciding whether to keep or discard. "Do not embarrass me in there," she hissed. She opened her door and stepped out, hauling the canvas bag with her. I scrambled to follow, my legs feeling heavy, like I was wading through water. As I reached the sidewalk, I put my hand out to steady the bag on her shoulder. A subconscious gesture to help her with the weight. My fingers brushed against the rough canvas fabric. I froze. Through the thick material, I could feel the dense, brick-like solidity of the cash bundles inside, but there was no warmth to it. It didn't feel like security. It didn't feel like a future. It felt freezing. It felt dead. When I touched that bag, a chill shot up my arm that had nothing to do with the wind. It felt exactly like the time I had to identify a body in a morgue. That shocking, unnatural cold of something that used to have life and now was just an object. Marlene slapped my hand away. "Stop touching it," she spat. "You look guilty." She turned and marched toward the glass doors. I followed her, the knot in my stomach tightening into a scream that I didn't know how to release. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was just stressed. But as the automatic doors slid open to swallow us whole, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't walking into a bank. I was walking into a cage, and the door was about to lock behind me. My parents' house in Cincinnati was a single-story brick bungalow that smelled permanently of lavender potpourri and furniture polish. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through lace curtains, and where nothing bad was ever supposed to happen. I had given the taxi driver a $20 tip to drive faster, and when I finally stumbled through the front door, I locked it behind me with trembling fingers, sliding the deadbolt home as if I were barring the door against a physical army rather than a financial one. The house was empty. My parents were at their weekly bridge club. I was grateful for the silence, though it felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't put down my purse. I marched straight into the kitchen, the linoleum floor squeaking under my heels, and pulled the crumpled yellow receipt paper from my pocket. My hands were shaking so violently that I had to place the paper flat on the kitchen island to read the numbers. I stared at the digits, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I typed the number into my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button. I was terrified of who might answer. I was terrified of what they would say. But the image of Marlene's face, twisted in that scream of entitlement on the sidewalk, pushed me forward. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" The voice was a whisper, sharp and frantic. "It's the woman from the window," I said, my voice cracking. "You told me to run." "Oh, thank God," the voice breathed out. I heard the sound of a heavy door clicking shut in the background, followed by the hum of ventilation. "Listen to me. I do not have much time. I am hiding in the records retention room, but my manager is going to start looking for me in 5 minutes." It was Elena, the teller. The professional mask was gone, replaced by the raw, jagged edge of adrenaline. "What is happening?" I asked, gripping the edge of the granite counter until my knuckles turned white. "Why did you tell me to run?" "My mother-in-law just wanted to open a certificate of deposit." "No," Elena said, her voice dropping even lower. "She did not want a certificate. That was the cover. Listen to me very carefully. When I pulled up the profile for the new account Marlene wanted to open, the system flagged it immediately. There was a pre-existing instruction attached to her social security number. Pending funds availability. I do not understand," I said. "What kind of instruction?" "A sweep order," Elena said. The words came out fast, like bullets. "It is a standing authorization. It means that the second any significant deposit hits an account in her name, the system is programmed to automatically wire the entire balance out to an external account. It bypasses the hold period because it was pre-verified yesterday." The room spun. I grabbed a kitchen chair and sat down before my legs gave out. "Yesterday? Marlene was at the bank yesterday?" "Yes," Elena said. "She came in to set up the transfer protocol. She signed all the waivers. If you had let her deposit that $1 million today, the money would have been in her account for less than 10 seconds. By the time you walked out the door, that balance would have been zero." "Where?" I whispered. "Where was the money going?" "I wrote it down before I cleared the screen," Elena said. I could hear papers rustling on her end. "The receiving account is at a private offshore holding bank. The beneficiary name is Sloan R. Whitney." I frowned. the name bouncing off my brain without sticking. Sloan Whitney? I do not know anyone by that name. Is it a company? It is an individual account, Elena replied. But that is not the worst part. The system flagged it because the authorization was signed with a witness. Marlene did not come in alone yesterday. I felt a cold prickle of dread crawl up my spine. Who was she with? Was it my husband? Grant Thomas? No, Elena said. It was a woman, young, maybe 25, blonde, very pregnant. The air left my lungs as if I had been punched in the solar plexus. Pregnant? Yes, Elena continued, the rush of information accelerating. They were laughing. Marlene was holding the woman's hand, patting her stomach. I heard them talking about the nursery. Marlene kept introducing her to the staff as family. She said they were preparing for the baby's arrival and needed to get their finances in order. I thought she was her daughter. I stared at the wall of my parents' kitchen, at the framed cross-stitch that said "Home Sweet Home." My brain was trying to reject the information, trying to find a logical explanation that didn't involve the complete incineration of my reality. But the pieces were locking together with terrifying precision. The late nights Grant spent at the office, the text messages he angled away from me, Marlene's sudden obsession with protecting the family assets. They were celebrating, I whispered, the realization tasting like ash in my mouth. They were celebrating spending my money on his mistress. If you had stayed, Elena said, her voice urgent again, pulling me back from the edge of the abyss. If you had stayed and let that transaction go through, or if you had signed as a witness or a joint holder, you would have been legally tying yourself to the transfer. You would have been validating the source of funds. If you tried to claim fraud later, they would have produced your signature on the deposit slip next to Marlene's. You would not just be broke, you would be complicit. They were using you to launder your own life savings away from yourself. Why are you telling me this? I asked, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. You could lose your job. Because I saw your face, Elena said softly. And I saw hers, that woman, Marlene. She looked at you like you were a disposable wrapper. I have seen asset stripping schemes before, but never one this cruel. You needed to know. But now, you have to disappear. Do not go home. Do not answer their calls. Call a lawyer who specializes in forensic accounting. Do it now. Thank you, I choked out. Delete this number, Elena said. Good luck. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and sat in the silence of the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. A clock ticked on the wall. Normal sounds in a world that had suddenly become alien. I looked down at my hands. They were the same hands that had worked for 10 years to build my design firm. They were the hands that had signed checks, drawn blueprints, and smoothed Grant's hair when he was stressed. Now, they felt heavy and useless. The trap had been perfect. It was a financial guillotine, and I had placed my own neck on the block. Marlene and Grant hadn't just planned to steal the money. They had planned to do it in a way that made it look like I had handed it to them. They wanted to leave me destitute, while they built a new life with a woman named Sloan and a baby that should have been ours. I stood up and walked into the living room, my legs moving on autopilot. I looked at the photos on the mantel. Pictures of me at graduation. Pictures of me and Grant at our wedding. In the wedding photo, Marlene was standing next to us, smiling. I looked closer at that smile now. It wasn't warmth. It was patience. It was the smile of a predator waiting for the prey to get fat enough to eat. My stomach twisted, but the nausea was gone. In its place was something colder, harder. It felt like steel settling into my bones. I wasn't just a wife who had been cheated on. I was a shield they had used to deflect the blow of their own greed. I was the patsy. Sloan R. Whitney. I said the name aloud to the empty room. It sounded like a challenge. I wasn't safe here. Grant knew where my parents lived. They would be coming. I needed to move. I needed to think. And for the first time in years, I realized I needed to stop acting like a family member and start acting like a CEO whose company was under a hostile takeover. I grabbed my purse and walked to the back door. I wasn't running away anymore. I was repositioning, The hunt had started, but they had made a fatal error. They thought they were hunting a domesticated animal. They were about to find out they had wounded something entirely different. The silence of my parents' living room did not last long. It was shattered less than 20 minutes later by the sound of tires screeching against the asphalt outside. It was a violent, aggressive sound, the noise of a vehicle being parked by someone in a rage. My father, who was sitting in his armchair reading the afternoon paper, looked up, his brow furrowed. I was curled up on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow to my chest, my large leather handbag tucked firmly behind my back. I had hidden the canvas bag with the $1 million inside the hollow bench of the upright piano in the hallway, buried under stacks of sheet music from the 1980s. "Who on earth drives like that in a residential neighborhood?" my father asked, standing up. Before I could answer, the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was a rhythmic, demanding hammering on the front door that shook the frame. "Harper, open this door!" It was Grant. His voice was muffled by the wood, but the panic in it was unmistakable. I stood up, adjusting my grip on the pillow, intentionally hunching my shoulders to make myself look smaller, frailer. "I will get it, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "It is them." I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Grant and Marlene were standing on the porch. They looked like they had just run a marathon. Grant's tie was askew, his forehead slick with sweat. Marlene was breathing hard, her chest heaving beneath her stiff suit jacket. Marlene did not say hello. She did not look at my pale face. She did not ask if my appendix had ruptured or if I needed an ambulance. Her eyes immediately scanned the space behind me, darting left and right like a radar seeking a target. "Where is it?" she demanded, pushing past me into the foyer without an invitation. "Where's the bag?" "Harper?" "Marlene," Grant warned, stepping in after her. Though he didn't stop her, he looked at me, his eyes wide and searching. "Babe, are you okay? You ran out. We were terrified." I leaned against the doorframe, letting my eyelids droop. I had to sell this. My life depended on them believing I was incompetent, not calculating. I thought I was dying," I whispered, clutching my stomach. "The pain. It was blinding. I just needed to get out of there. I needed my mom." "The money. Harper," Marlene barked, spinning around to face me. She was vibrating with tension. "Did you leave it at the counter? Did you bring it here? Where is the $1 million? I swallowed hard, looking from her to Grant. I gave it to them." I lied. The words tasted like ash, but I forced them out. "I pushed it through the window to the teller. I told her to put it in the account. I couldn't hold it anymore. I was in so much pain." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The rage on Marlene's face melted into a sudden, greedy hunger. Grant's expression went from stress to practically euphoric. "You deposited it?" Grant asked, stepping closer, his hands reaching out as if to touch me, but stopping short. "You gave it to Elena?" "Yes," I breathed out. "I told her to finish it. I just ran." Grant immediately whipped his phone out of his pocket. His fingers flew across the screen, tapping into the mobile banking app. Marlene crowded his shoulder, watching the screen with the intensity of a hawk. They were silent for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then, the air left the room. "It is not here," Grant said, his voice hollow. He refreshed the screen. "Nothing. The balance is still the opening minimum. There is no pending transaction." "What?" Marlene shrieked. She turned on me, her eyes bulging. "You said you gave it to her. Why isn't it showing? Did she steal it? Did you drop it?" "I don't know," I cried, backing away until I hit the hallway wall. "I just pushed it through. Maybe the system is slow. Why are you yelling at me?" "Because that is $1 million, Marlene screamed. Suddenly, a third figure appeared in the doorway behind them. It was Blair Thomas, Grant's younger sister. I hadn't even heard her car pull up. Blair was wearing gym clothes, her face pinched and sour. She had always hated me. mostly because I refused to let her treat me like a doormat. "She is lying," Blair announced, storming into the house like she owned it. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "Look at her. She doesn't look sick. She looks guilty. She didn't deposit anything. She stole it. She is trying to hoard it for herself because she knows Grant is too good for her." "Watch your mouth," a deep voice boomed from the living room. My father stepped into the foyer. He was a retired structural engineer, a man of few words and immense calm. He stood between me and the Thomas clan, crossing his arms over his chest. He wasn't a tall man, but in that moment, he looked like a fortress. "Mr. Thomas," Grant started, holding up his hands. "We are just trying to—" "You are coming into my house, screaming at my daughter who is clearly unwell, about money," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Nobody touches her. Nobody accuses her of anything. If you have banking issues, take it up with the bank." Marlene, sensing the wall she had just hit, immediately shifted tactics. It was a transformation so swift, it was almost impressive. Her shoulders slumped. Her face crumpled. Tears, seemingly on command, welled up in her eyes. "Oh, Arthur, please," she sobbed, reaching for a tissue that wasn't there. "I am just so worried. That money, it is everything. It is for the family's future, for Grant's future. If something happened to it, if Harper made a mistake," she looked at me with wet, pleading eyes that didn't match the cold calculation I had seen 5 minutes ago. "I just want to make sure we are safe." Grant stepped forward, playing his part, the good husband. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. His touch, which used to comfort me, now made my skin crawl. "I am sorry, babe," he said softly. "Mom is just panicked. We all are. That is a lot of money to be in limbo." "I know," I whispered, keeping my eyes down. "But Harper," Grant said, his voice dropping a decibel, becoming intimate. "Are you sure you gave it to the teller? Is there any chance you have it? Maybe in your car? Or in your purse?" His eyes dropped to the handbag I was hiding behind my back. He stared at it. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a laser-focused, hungry stare. He was mentally undressing the bag, calculating if $10,100 bills could fit inside the leather dimensions. He looked at that bag the way a starving man looks at a locked refrigerator. "I told you," I said, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with the effort of not screaming the truth. "I gave it to the teller." Grant stared at me for a long moment. He was assessing me. He was looking for the crack in the facade. He saw a pale, trembling woman clutching a pillow, protected by her father. He didn't see the wife he knew. He saw an obstacle. "Okay," Grant said, exhaling slowly. "Okay, we will go back to the bank. We will demand they check the cameras. If Elena took it, we will have her arrested." "We are going nowhere until we find that money," Blair hissed. "Blair, get in the car," Grant ordered, his voice sharp. He turned back to me. He leaned in close, invading my personal space, ostensibly to kiss my cheek. His lips brushed my ear, and the warmth of his breath sent a shiver of revulsion down my spine. "You need to think very carefully about what happened today." "Harper," he whispered. The good husband mask slipped just enough for me to see the teeth beneath. "If you are playing a game, you are going to lose. Don't make this worse for yourself." He pulled back, giving my shoulder a squeeze that was just a little too hard to be affectionate. "Rest up, honey," he said loudly, for my father's benefit. "I will call you when we sort this out." He turned and ushered his mother and sister out the door. Marlene cast one last, longing look at the interior of the house, as if she could smell the money hiding in the piano bench. Then they were gone. My father closed the door and locked it. He turned to me, his face grave. "Harper," he said quietly, "you didn't deposit that money, did you?" I dropped the pillow. I let the sick wife act slide off my body like a heavy coat. I walked to the window and watched Grant's car peel away from the curb. "No, Dad," I said, I didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling from when I was 12. I realized something in the darkness. Grant, Marlene, Blair, they were only kind when they thought they were winning. Their love was conditional on my submission. As long as I was the quiet wife signing the papers, I was family. The moment I became a variable they couldn't control, I became an enemy. I rolled over and checked my phone. No messages. They were probably tearing the bank apart right now. Let them. I had bought myself 12 hours. Tomorrow, I would stop trembling. Tomorrow, I would start hunting. The cafe was a jagged scar in the brickwork of an alleyway in the Over-the-Rhine district, a place so inconspicuous it felt intentional. There was no sign above the door, just a single, flickering amber bulb that buzzed like a trapped insect. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and burnt espresso. It was the kind of establishment where people came to be forgotten, which made it the perfect place for two women who were currently hiding from the ruin of their own lives. I found Elena Parkhurst in the back booth, her back pressed against the peeling vinyl. She had traded her crisp bank blazer for a nondescript gray raincoat, and her hair was loose, falling around her face in messy waves. She looked younger than she had behind the glass, but her eyes were older. They held the terrified exhaustion of someone who had just looked behind the curtain of the world and seen the gears grinding bone. "You came," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator unit behind the counter. "You saved me," I replied, sliding into the seat opposite her. I had to know why. Elena wrapped her hands around a mug of black coffee, seeking its warmth. "I am not a hero, Harper, and I am not curious. I am afraid. I have worked in banking for 12 years. I have seen divorces, I have seen bankruptcies, and I have seen fraud. But what I saw on my screen yesterday was not just fraud, it was an execution." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and then slid it across the scratched tabletop toward me. "I took a picture of the monitor when the manager was at lunch," she whispered. "I cropped out the bank codes so they cannot trace it back to my terminal ID. But the rest is real." I looked down. It was a grainy photo of a banking interface. The text was stark and undeniable. Standing order, immediate sweep. Trigger, deposit exceeding $500,000. Beneficiary, Sloan R., Whitney, Institution, Cayman Islands Offshore Holdings. "They did not just want to steal the money," Elena explained, her finger tracing the line on the screen. "They wanted to wash it. The moment that certificate of deposit was funded, this script would have triggered. The money would have bounced through 3 different international servers before settling in that offshore account. By the time you realized the balance was 0, the money would have been legally unreachable." "Sloan R. Whitney?" I said, the name tasting like poison. "I still do not know who she is." Elena hesitated. She looked down at her coffee, then back up at me with a gaze full of pity that stung worse than the betrayal itself. "I do," she said softly. My heart stopped. "What?" "Yesterday," Elena said, leaning in closer. "When Marlene came in to pre-authorize the transfer, she was not alone. She was with a young woman, maybe 24 or 25 years old, platinum blonde hair, very expensive clothes." Elena paused, taking a breath. "And she was heavily pregnant. Harper, 7 or 8 months along." The room seemed to tilt. The amber light blurred. "Pregnant?" "Marlene was parading her around the lobby," Elena continued, the words falling like stones. "She introduced her to the branch manager as her new daughter, not daughter-in-law, just daughter, but the girl, she called Marlene Mom. They were laughing about setting up a nursery. They were looking at brochures for college savings plans. They were building a future, Harper, and they were funding it with your past." I sat back against the cold vinyl. The breath knocked out of me. It wasn't just an affair. Grant hadn't just found a mistress. They had built an entire parallel family. They had replaced me. While I was at home, cooking dinner, signing papers, and trying to be the perfect wife to a man who seemed distant. They were already living the next chapter. I wasn't the wife anymore. I was the obsolete model, waiting to be scrapped for parts. "The baby," I whispered. "That is why they needed the cash now. The baby is coming." "Asset stripping," Elena said grimly. "That is what we call it in corporate raiding. You take a company that is still functioning. You sell off everything of value, the machinery, the land, the inventory, and then you let the shell declare bankruptcy. You are the company, Harper, and they are stripping you down to the studs." She reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. If they have a sweep order on the cash, they have not stopped there. You do not set up an offshore account for just one transaction. You need to check everything: the house, the cars, the land, the life insurance policies, the business loans, everything." I stared at her. "The house is in both our names. He cannot sell it without my signature." "You told me you signed papers," Elena said, her voice sharp. "You said Grant brought you papers late at night. Did you read every single page? Did you read the fine print on the back? Did you check for powers of attorney?" A cold horror washed over me. I remembered the nights Grant would come into the studio, holding a stack of documents, smiling that charming, tired smile. "Just some refinancing paperwork. Babe, just an updated insurance rider. Trust me." I had trusted him. I had signed my name where he pointed, again and again. "I need to know," I said, my voice trembling. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced my fingers to work. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Noah Baines. Noah was my second cousin, a paralegal who worked in the county clerk's office. He was a night owl, usually awake until 3 a.m. playing video games. I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Harper?" Noah's voice was groggy but alert. "Is everything okay? It is almost 11 at night." "Noah, I need you to do something for me," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I need you to log into the county property records database, right now. Now, Harper. I am in my pajamas. Can't this wait until morning?" "No," I said, my voice hard. "It cannot wait. Please. Noah, I think Grant might have sold the house." There was a silence on the other end, then the sound of a chair scraping and a keyboard clacking. Okay. I am logging in. Give me a second. Accessing the deed registry." I waited, my phone pressed to my ear, watching Elena. She was chewing her lip, looking at the door, expecting security or police to burst in at any moment. "Okay, I have the parcel number," Noah said. "Search is running. Harper, this is weird." "What is weird?" I demanded. "The title history," Noah said slowly. "There was a quitclaim deed recorded 4 months ago. It transferred 50% of the ownership interest, your half, to a holding trust." "What trust?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The Crow Family Revocable Trust," Noah read. "Trustee? Marlene Crow." I closed my eyes. "And the other half?" "Grant's half was transferred to the same trust 2 weeks later," Noah said. "Harper, you do not own that house anymore. Marlene does. The paperwork says you signed the quitclaim in front of a notary on October 15th. October 15th. I remembered that day. Grant had taken me to a fancy dinner. Before we left, he said he needed me to sign a document for the home security system upgrade. The notary was a friend of his who had stopped by. "Thank you, Noah," I said, my voice dead. "Send me the files. Do not tell anyone you looked this up." "Harper, what is going on?" Noah asked, panic rising in his voice. "I will explain later," I said, and hung up. I looked at Elena. She didn't need to ask. She saw the answer on my face. "They took the house," I said. 4 months ago, I have been paying the mortgage on a house I do not own. I have been cleaning floors that belong to Marlene." "You have to be careful," Elena said, leaning across the table again. You cannot just storm in there and scream. They have the paperwork. Legally, they are in the right. If you want to fight this, you need proof of fraud. You need to prove coercion or deception, and you need to do it before they liquidate the trust. I do not want to just fight them, I said. I want to destroy them. Elena nodded, acknowledging the shift in my tone. Then you need to go back. You need to play the role. You need to be the confused, sick wife for just a little longer. Let them think they are safe. People make mistakes when they think they have won. She stood up, buttoning her raincoat. I have to go. My husband thinks I'm getting milk. If you need me, call the burner number I gave you. But Harper? Do not trust anyone else. Not the police, not the bank manager, not your friends. Money this big makes people do terrible things. She turned and walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the rainy night like a ghost. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty coffee mug, the amber light reflected in the black liquid. I thought about the pregnant woman, Sloane. I thought about Marlene's hand on her stomach. I thought about Grant's smile as he handed me the pen to sign away my home. For the last 10 years, I had defined myself by how much I could give. I gave my time, my talent, my money, my love. I had begged for their affection, hoping that if I just gave enough, I would finally be worthy of it. That woman died in this cafe tonight. I stood up and walked to the door. I felt strange. My stomach wasn't nodding anymore. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't a victim. I was a loose end they had failed to cut, and they were about to learn that you should never leave a loose end capable of striking a match. I pushed the metal door open and stepped out into the dark alley, ready to go back into the lion's den, not to be eaten, but to rearrange the food chain. I sat in my car, the engine idling, the heater blasting against the damp chill that had settled into my bones after leaving the alleyway cafe. The rain had started to fall in earnest, drumming a frantic rhythm against the roof. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, lighting up the dark interior. It was Noah Baines again. I picked it up, my hand steady now. Tell me you have good news. Noah? I wish I did. Noah's voice came through the speaker, sounding thin and strained. Harper, I kept digging after we hung up. I pulled the full transactional history for every asset attached to your Social Security number. It is not just the house. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the headrest. What else? The 2 acres of undeveloped land in Westchester, Noah said. The plot your grandfather left you? It is gone. That is impossible, I said, my voice flat. I pay property taxes on that land every 6 months. I just sent a check in January. You sent a check to a holding company, Noah corrected gently. The title was transferred to the Crow Family Revocable Trust on the same day as the house, October 15th. And Harper? There is a loan against it, a construction lien for $300,000, taken out by a development firm called Holloway and Finch Interiors. The name hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Holloway and Finch Interiors. Suddenly, the rain and the dark car vanished. I was back in my kitchen. 4 months ago. It was a Tuesday evening. The air smelled of lemon pledge and the takeout Thai food Grant had brought home. He was pacing the kitchen island, his tie undone, his hair deliberately messy in that way that made him look like a tortured genius. He had spread a mountain of paperwork across the granite countertop. I need you to help me, babe, he had said, his eyes wide and pleading. The supply chain for the new hotel project is choking us. I need to secure a bridge line of credit for the new shell company, Holloway and Finch Interiors. It is just a vendor entity to handle the furniture imports. I had been exhausted. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at my own studio. I remembered looking at the stack of papers, at least 60 pages thick, filled with dense legal jargon, indemnification clauses, and banking codes. Grant, can I read this in the morning? I had asked, rubbing my temples. My eyes are crossing. He had moved around the counter then. Trapping me between his body and the sink, he smelled of expensive cologne and fear. We do not have until morning. Harper. The underwriters in London close in 3 hours. If I do not get these signatures faxed over tonight, the deal collapses. We lose the contract. We lose everything. He had grabbed my hand, pressing a heavy fountain pen into my fingers. It is just standard liability stuff. Spousal consent for a business loan. You trust me, don't you? Or do you want me to fail? That was the hook. Do you want me to fail? He knew I defined my worth by my ability to support him. He had started flipping the pages for me. Sign here, initial here, date this one, sign here. He moved so fast. His hand guiding the page turns, never letting my eyes rest on the text for more than a second. Just here, babe, almost done. You are saving my life. Sign here. I remembered signing a page that looked different from the others. The font was smaller. The header was obscured by the previous page Grant was holding down with his thumb. What is this one? I had asked. Just a collateral waiver, he had said, flipping it over before I could read the words, quitclaim deed or grantor. Last one. Done. Back in the car. I opened my eyes. The windshield was fogged up. I signed it, I whispered to Noah. I signed it all. They shuffled the deck, Noah said, his voice disgusted. It is a classic paper trail trick. They sandwich a deed transfer or a power of attorney in the middle of a stack of loan applications. You think you are signing for a credit check, but you are actually signing away your property rights. If it was notarized, they probably had a notary in their pocket who stamped it later. Grant's friend, I said. Mark, he came over for a drink an hour later. That is it, Noah said. Harper, legally, on paper. You consented to this. You gave them your house. You gave them your land. And by signing for Holloway and Finch, you might have made yourself personally liable for the corporate debt they are racking up. I felt a wave of nausea, but it wasn't the sick panic of a victim. It was the cold, hard shame of a fool. I had been so proud of being the supportive wife. I had thought my compliance was a virtue. I thought my lack of questions proved my loyalty. But to Grant and Marlene, my loyalty was just a security flaw they had exploited. They had not just stolen my money, they had farmed me. They have been planning this for a year, I said, my voice hardening. They waited until the land value went up. They waited until I liquidated my business assets into cash. They fattened me up. Noah, they grew the wool long enough to shear. And now they are getting ready to slaughter the sheep. You need to stay away from them, Noah warned. If you go back there, they might try to force you to sign something else. Or worse, if they know you know. No, I cut him off. If I stay away, they win. They have the house. They have the land. They think they have the money, or at least that it is in limbo. If I hide at my parents' house, I'm just waiting for the divorce papers to arrive. I need evidence. Noah, I need to prove that those signatures were obtained by fraud. I need to find the original documents. Harper, do not do this, Noah pleaded. It is dangerous. Grant keeps a safe in his home office, I said, thinking aloud. He thinks I do not know the combination, but I saw him type it in 3 years ago. He uses the date he graduated college. He is that arrogant. Harper, I am going back. Noah, I am going to be the wife they think I am. I am going to cry and beg and play the victim, and while they are gloating, I am going to burn their house down from the inside. I hung up the phone before he could argue. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the dark lot. I drove toward the suburbs, toward the house that was no longer mine. The rain slashed against the glass, distorting the streetlights into long, bleeding streaks of light. I pulled down the sun visor and slid open the vanity mirror. The light automatically clicked on, illuminating my face in a harsh, artificial glow. I looked at the woman in the reflection. Her mascara was smudged. Her skin was pale. She looked tired. But the eyes were different. The soft, pleading look that had defined Harper Thomas for 10 years was gone. The woman looking back at me was cold. She was calculating. She was done making people comfortable. You are not a sheep, I told my reflection. The words sounded loud in the small space. I snapped the visor shut. The drive to the house took 20 minutes. When I turned onto our street, Marlene Street, I corrected myself. I saw the lights were on. The BMW was in the driveway. They were home. They were probably in the living room right now, drinking my wine, discussing how to spin my mental breakdown to our friends, perhaps texting Sloan about the nursery colors. I parked the car. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hair, but I didn't wipe away the smudged mascara. I needed to look broken. I needed to look like I had nowhere else to go. I walked up the driveway, the rain soaking my shirt. I reached for the door handle, and for a second, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the cold metal. Inside that house were 3 people who viewed me as a resource to be mined. But I had something they didn't have. I knew the game had changed. They thought they were playing chess against a pawn. They didn't realize the pawn had just promoted herself to a queen. I opened the door and stepped into the warmth of the trap, ready to spring it shut on their fingers. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary hit me the moment I opened the front door. It was a domestic perfume, warm and inviting, designed to trigger a Pavlovian response of comfort and safety. But as I stepped into the foyer, dripping wet from the rain, I didn't feel comforted. I felt like a bomb disposal technician walking toward a ticking package. Grant was in the kitchen. He was wearing an apron over his dress shirt, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, displaying his forearms. He was chopping vegetables with a precision that seemed performative. When he saw me, he didn't ask where I had been. He didn't ask why I hadn't answered my phone for 3 hours. He put the knife down and walked over to me, his face arranged into a mask of aggressive concern. "Babe," he exhaled, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a restraint than an embrace. "You had me worried sick. I was about to call the police." I stood stiff in his arms, smelling the expensive scotch on his breath beneath the garlic. "I just needed to drive. Grant, my head was spinning." I know, he soothed, rubbing my back. "Mom was too hard on you. Blair was out of line. I sent them home. It is just us now. I made your favorite, risotto. We need to decompress." He led me to the island, where a glass of red wine was already poured. It was a scene from a catalog, the forgiving husband, the sanctuary home. If I hadn't known he had sold this house out from under me 4 months ago, I might have wept with gratitude. Now, I just wondered if the wine was poisoned. I took a sip. It was an expensive Cabernet. He was pulling out all the stops. "So," he said casually, turning back to the stove to stir the rice, "I have been thinking, since you deposited the money into your personal account, we should probably transfer it to the business account first thing in the morning, just to keep the liquidity ratios healthy for the auditors." There it was. He couldn't even wait until the food was plated. The hunger was eating him alive. I set the glass down, making sure my hand trembled slightly. "About that, Grant, I might have made a mistake." He stopped stirring. His back went rigid. "What kind of mistake?" "I was so panicked at the bank," I lied, keeping my voice low and wavering. "When I used the ATM to secure the deposit into my savings, my hands were shaking. I entered my PIN wrong, 3 times. Grant turned around slowly. The spatula in his hand was gripped so tight, his knuckles were white. And the machine ate the card," I whispered. "It locked the account for security fraud. I called the hotline from the car. They said because of the size of the attempted transaction and the PIN error, it is a mandatory freeze. I have to go into the branch personally to verify my identity and unlock it." "When?" Grant demanded. The word came out like a bark. "They said it takes 48 to 72 hours to clear the security flag," I said, watching his eyes. "I can't access the money until Thursday or Friday." For a split second, the mask fell. I saw it happen. His face contorted into a snarl of pure, unfiltered rage. His eyes went black with hatred. He looked at me not as his wife, but as an incompetent employee who had just cost him a fortune. He took a step toward me, and for the first time in our marriage, I thought he was going to hit me. Then, just as quickly. The switch flipped. He took a deep breath, forced a tight, pained smile onto his face, and ran a hand through his hair. "Okay," he said, his voice straining to be level. "Okay, it happens. You were stressed. It is just, the timing is tight for the business. Harper, but we will figure it out. Thursday. We can wait until Thursday." He turned back to the stove, but I saw his shoulders shaking. He wasn't cooking anymore. He was calculating. He was terrified. The sweep order he had set up with Marlene was timed. Every hour the money sat in limbo was an hour their plan could fall apart. We ate dinner in a silence that was loud with unsaid things. Grant drank 3 more glasses of scotch. He ate quickly, aggressively, his eyes darting to his phone every 2 minutes. By 10 o'clock, the alcohol had done its work. Grant stumbled up the stairs, muttering about a headache. I waited in the living room, listening to the heavy thud of his footsteps. Then the sound of the master bathroom door closing, followed by the shower turning on. I moved. I didn't go upstairs. I went to the garage. Grant was a creature of habit, and he was arrogant. He believed I was too stupid to look, and too trusting to search. But I also knew he never kept his secrets in the house where Marlene might snoop during her inspections. He kept his life in his car, a pristine black sedan that was his pride and joy. I opened the driver's side door. The interior smelled of leather and the mints he ate to hide the scotch. I checked the glove box, nothing but registration and insurance. I checked the center console, sunglasses, charging cables. I felt under the seats. My fingers brushed against the carpet. Then, under the passenger seat, tucked deep beneath the floor mat where it curled up against the center tunnel. I felt it, a hard, rectangular shape. I pulled it out. It was a smartphone. Not his work phone, not his personal phone. A third one. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pressed the power button. It was locked, of course, but Grant wasn't creative. I tried the last 4 digits of his social security number. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. Then I remembered the new daughter, the baby. I typed in the due date of a pregnancy, a date I had seen circled on a calendar in Marlene's kitchen 2 weeks ago, which I had foolishly thought marked a charity gala. April 4th, the phone unlocked. I went straight to the messages. There was only one active conversation thread. The contact name was simply S. I scrolled up, and the breath left my lungs. S. Today, 4:15 p.m. Did the wire hit? The account is empty. Grant. There was a snag. She ran out of the bank. Says she got sick. Claims she deposited it. But I can't see it. Son W. You said she was handled. You said she was docile. Grant. She is. She's just an idiot. She probably messed up the paperwork. I'm going to her parents' place to get the cash. Fix this, Grant. The closing on the Miami condo is next week, and I'm not waiting around. If the money isn't here by Friday, I'm walking, and I'm taking your son with me. Grant. Don't threaten me. Sloan, I'm handling it. Once the cash clears, I serve her the papers. She'll be out of the house by the weekend. You can move in on Monday. I read the texts again, forcing the words to burn into my retina. Docile, idiot, out of the house by the weekend. I scrolled further back. There were photos, ultrasounds, pictures of Grant, my husband, kissing the stomach of a woman I had never met. She was beautiful, young. She looked at him with the same adoration I once had. Then I saw a message from yesterday. S. Are we still on for the party on Saturday? Mom wants to do the reveal. Grant. Yes, it's Mom's birthday. But we'll announce the change in management then. Harper will be gone. We'll introduce you to the partners as the future Mrs. Thomas. A party. They were planning a party to celebrate my erasure. I pulled out my own phone and started taking pictures. I photographed every text, every timestamp. I went into his email app on the burner phone. I found hotel receipts for the business trips he had taken to Chicago, which were actually weekends at a luxury resort 3 hours away. I found a PDF attachment titled Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Draft 4. I opened it. It was dated for next Monday. The terms were brutal. It claimed I was financially unstable, mentally incompetent, and that the prenuptial agreement, which I didn't remember signing, but now realized was probably slipped into a mortgage stack, precluded me from alimony. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady with the precision of a surgeon. I got everything. I heard the water turn off upstairs. I quickly wiped my fingerprints from the screen, locked the burner phone, and slid it back exactly where I found it. Under the floor mat. I smoothed the carpet. I walked back into the house, locking the door silently behind me. I went upstairs, stripped off my clothes, and put on my pajamas. I brushed my teeth, staring at my reflection. When I walked into the bedroom, Grant was already in bed, passed out on his back, snoring softly. He looked innocent in his sleep. His eyelashes fluttered. I climbed into the bed. I lay down next to him. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Yesterday, I would have curled into that heat. I would have put my head on his chest and listened to his heart, believing it beat for me. Tonight, I lay on the very edge of the mattress, my back to him. I looked at the dark window. The man sleeping next to me wasn't my husband. He was a stranger who had been squatting in my life, eating my food, spending my money, and waiting for the right moment to evict me. Friday. I thought, he thinks he has until Friday. He was wrong. He didn't have until Friday. He didn't even have until tomorrow. Because while he was dreaming of his new life with Sloan and his son, I was lying awake, and I was holding the match that would burn his entire fantasy to the ground. Dana Kessler's office was not in a glass skyscraper downtown. It was in a renovated brownstone in a neighborhood that straddled the line between historic and gentrified, much like my own life was currently straddling the line between marriage and total collapse. Dana was a woman who looked like she chewed nails for breakfast and chased them with espresso. She sat behind a desk cluttered with case files, reviewing the screenshots I had printed out at a 24-hour copy center. "This is not a divorce case, Harper," Dana said, tossing the photo of the burner phone text messages onto the mahogany surface. "This is grand larceny wearing a wedding ring. We are looking at fraudulent conveyance, conspiracy to commit fraud, and a textbook case of asset stripping." I sat opposite her, my hands folded in my lap. I felt surprisingly calm. "Can we get the house back? And the land?" Dana leaned back, tapping a pen against her chin. "The quitclaim deeds are problematic because you signed them. However, since the signatures were obtained under duress and with the intent to defraud, specifically to hide assets from a spouse while simultaneously planning to discard that spouse, we have a strong case to pierce the corporate veil. But we have to move fast. If they liquidate that trust, or if that sweep order on the cash executes, we are chasing ghosts in the Cayman Islands." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "Here is the strategy. We do not file for divorce yet. That tips them off. We file an emergency ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order to freeze all assets, the house, the land, the bank accounts, and the shell company Holloway and Finch. We hit them with a surprise audit." "I need to know something else," I said. "Sloan R. Whitney? Who is she?" Dana's eyes darkened. She opened a manila folder she had prepared before I arrived. "I ran a background check on your husband's friend. Sloan is not just a mistress. Harper. She has a master's degree in forensic accounting. She worked for a boutique firm in Chicago that was investigated 2 years ago for helping high-net-worth individuals hide assets during bankruptcy proceedings. She was never charged, but she was definitely involved." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She is the architect," I whispered. "Grant is not smart enough to set up offshore sweep accounts. Marlene is too old school. Sloan is the one running the numbers." "Exactly," Dana said. "She is not waiting for Grant to leave you so they can fall in love. She is waiting for Grant to liquidate your life so she can wash the money. She is a professional money launderer, and your husband is her current project." My stomach turned, but it was a cold, hard sensation. "So what do we do?" "We let them think they have won," Dana said. her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level. "You need to go back there and convince them the money is safe. I need 48 hours to get the judge to sign the emergency orders without a hearing. I need you to buy me time. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "I can do that." "And Harper," Dana added, sliding a small digital recorder across the desk. "Ohio is a one-party consent state. That means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling them. Get them talking. I need them to admit they plan to dump you once the money clears. If we have that on tape, we destroy them in court." I took the recorder. It felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. When I returned to the house, the atmosphere was tense. Marlene was sitting at the kitchen table, aggressively highlighting a Bible passage. Blair was scrolling through her phone on the sofa. Grant was nowhere to be seen, likely at work trying to hold off his creditors. I walked into the kitchen, making sure my steps sounded heavy and tired. I held a piece of paper in my hand, an old deposit confirmation slip I had dug out of a file box in the basement, folded so the date was obscured. "Marlene," I said, my voice wavering perfectly. "I found it." She looked up, her eyes snapping to the paper like a shark smelling blood. "Found what?" "The receipt," I said, placing it on the table but keeping my hand on it. "I was so confused yesterday. I thought the machine ate the card, but I checked my purse again. I must have successfully deposited the check before the screen froze. Look, it says transaction complete." Marlene snatched the paper from under my hand. She didn't look at the date. She looked at the amount I had handwritten on the back in a note to myself years ago. She saw what she wanted to see. "It went through?" she breathed, her face lighting up with a terrifying greed. "The $1 million is in the account?" "I think so," I said, rubbing my forehead. "The app is still locked, but if I have this receipt, it means the money is there. It will just take a day or two for the bank to process the sweep order you set up, right?" "Yes," Marlene said, standing up, practically vibrating. "Yes, exactly. Oh, thank heavens. Grant," she yelled toward the study. "Grant, come here." She ignored me completely. To her, I was no longer a person. I was a solved problem. I excused myself, saying I needed to lie down. I went upstairs, but I didn't go to the bedroom. I sat at the top of the landing, out of sight, and turned on the recorder Dana had given me. Downstairs, the voices carried clearly. They weren't whispering anymore. They were celebrating. "I told you she was too stupid to ruin it." Blair's voice drifted up, dripping with disdain. "She probably just forgot where she put the slip. God, she is useless." "It does not matter," Marlene said, her voice crisp and businesslike. "The money is in the system. The sweep will trigger by Friday morning. Sloan checks the offshore balance every hour. Once that money lands in the Cayman account, we are done." "When do we tell her?" Grant asked. His voice sounded relieved, but also cold. "Saturday," Marlene decided. "At my birthday party, it is the perfect stage. All the partners will be there. We introduce Sloan. We announce the restructuring of the company. And we hand Harper the divorce papers quietly in the kitchen. She will be too humiliated to cause a scene in front of half the town." "I can't wait to see her face," Blair giggled. "Mom, can I have her studio space? I want to turn it into a yoga room." "We are selling the house, Blair," Grant said. "Sloan wants a place in Indian Hill. We are liquidating this asset next month. Harper will have 30 days to vacate, per the eviction notice I drafted." 30 days is too generous," Marlene scoffed. "Give her a week. She has parents. Let her crawl back to them." I sat on the carpeted floor, watching the little red light on the recorder blink, 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 blink. Every word was a nail in their coffin. They were discussing the destruction of my life with the casual excitement of planning a vacation. They were parsing out my home, my workspace, and my dignity. I stopped the recording. I had enough. I went into the bedroom and texted Dana. "I have the admission. They think the money clears Friday. The reveal party is Saturday night." Dana's reply came 3 minutes later. "Perfect. The judge is reviewing the motion now. We will time the service of the temporary restraining order for Saturday night. We catch them all together, Grant, Marlene, and Sloane. If Sloane is at that party, we serve her too. I put the phone down and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of moon. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt mine again. I wasn't asking why anymore. I didn't care why they were monsters. I didn't care about Grant's weakness or Marlene's greed or Sloane's ambition. The only question that mattered now was how I was going to stand on that stage on Saturday. They wanted a show? They wanted a grand reveal? I would give them one, but the script was mine now. And when the curtain came down, I would be the only one left standing. Saturday arrived with the relentless brightness of a migraine. The sky, which had been gray and bruising all week, had cleared into a mockery of a beautiful spring day. Inside the house, the air was thick with the scent of lilies, Marlene's favorite flower, and the smell I now associated with funerals. By noon, the house was no longer a home. It was a theater set. Caterers I hadn't hired were bustling through the kitchen, plating miniature crab cakes and polishing champagne flutes. Marlene was directing them with the imperious hand gestures of a traffic cop. Her voice shrill with the anxiety of perfection. She wanted the neighbors to see a dynasty. She wanted the partners from Grant's firm to see stability. Most of all, she wanted to create a glittering, impenetrable surface that would blind everyone to the rot underneath. I was in the bedroom, staring at the walk-in closet, when Grant walked in. He was already dressed in his tuxedo, looking handsome in that superficial catalog way that used to make my heart stutter. Now, he just looked like a well-groomed reptile. "What are you wearing?" he asked, his voice sharp with disapproval. I was holding a navy silk dress, one of the few nice things I had left that fit well. "I thought this would be appropriate for your mother's birthday." Grant walked over, snatched the silk dress from my hands, and tossed it onto the floor. He went to the back of the closet, rummaging through the bags of clothes I had set aside for donation months ago. He pulled out a shapeless, beige knit dress that I had worn once to a funeral 5 years ago. It was dull, ill-fitting, and made me look 10 years older and 20 pounds heavier. "Wear this," he said, throwing it at me. It landed with a soft, insulting thud against my chest. "Grant, this has a stain on the hem," I said, keeping my voice small, submissive. "Nobody is going to be looking at the hem." "Harper," he sneered, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. "Because nobody is going to be looking at you. I do not want you circulating tonight. I do not want you making small talk with the investors and confusing them with your nervous energy. You stay in the kitchen. Make sure the catering staff keeps the drinks flowing. Keep the hors d'oeuvres moving. Just try not to embarrass me, okay? Tonight is about the future of the company. It is not about you." I looked at the beige dress. It was a uniform. He was demoting me from wife to staff in my own home. "Okay, Grant," I whispered, lowering my eyes. "I just want to help." "Good," he said, patting my cheek with a patronizing tap. "Then help by being invisible." He left the room. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. Invisible, I thought, that is exactly what I need to be. I put on the ugly dress. I pulled my hair back into a severe, unflattering ponytail. I scrubbed my face clean of makeup, leaving me looking pale and washed out. I looked exactly like the broken, defeated woman they believed I was. I went downstairs, while Marlene was screaming at a waiter about the placement of the napkins. I slipped into the living room, where a team of audiovisual technicians was setting up a massive LED screen. I had booked them myself 3 days ago, using the joint credit card, under the guise of preparing a tribute slideshow for Marlene. "Is it ready?" I asked the lead technician, a young guy named Mike who was taping down cables. "All set, Mrs. Thomas," Mike said cheerfully. "We have the laptop hooked up to the main projector and the surround sound. Do you want to test the file?" "No," I said quickly. "It is a surprise. Just make sure the volume is up. When I press this button, I held up the small remote control. I need it to override everything. Music, microphone, everything. You got it, Mike said, handing me the clicker. It is going to be a great birthday surprise. Oh, it will be unforgettable, I promised. I slipped the remote into the deep pocket of the beige dress. It felt heavy and cool against my hip. By 7 o'clock, the house was full. 50 people, relatives, neighbors, business partners, were crowded into the living room and spilling out onto the patio. The noise was a dull roar of polite laughter and clinking glass. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, holding a tray of empty glasses, watching the performance. Marlene was in her element. She was wearing a sequined gold gown that cost more than my first car. She was holding court by the fireplace, accepting compliments, laughing that fake, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Then, the front door opened, and the air in the room seemed to shift. Sloan R. Whitney walked in. She was breathtaking. I had seen her photos on the burner phone, but seeing her in the flesh was a visceral shock. She was wearing a form-fitting white dress that accentuated her 7-month pregnancy, displaying the baby bump like a trophy. Her platinum hair was styled in loose, expensive waves. She radiated health, wealth, and confidence. Marlene broke away from a conversation with the bank manager and rushed over to her. She didn't shake Sloane's hand. She embraced her, kissing her on both cheeks. "Oh, you made it," Marlene exclaimed, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Everyone, come meet her. This is Sloane." Sloane smiled, placing a hand on her stomach. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said. The word hung in the air. Mom. I saw a few neighbors exchange confused glances. They looked around for me, saw the drab woman in the kitchen doorway, and quickly looked away, embarrassed on my behalf. They thought I was being pushed out. They didn't know I was already gone. Grant appeared at Sloane's side. He placed a hand on the small of her back, a gesture so intimate, so possessive, that it made my skin crawl. He guided her into the room, introducing her to the senior partners of his firm. "This is Sloane Whitney," I heard him say to Mr. Henderson, the firm's biggest investor. "She is the brilliant mind behind our new offshore restructuring. We are bringing her on as CFO next month." "Impressive," Henderson said, looking at Sloane's stomach. "And when is the little one due?" "April," Grant answered, beaming. "We are all very excited about the new additions to the family." I gripped the doorframe of the kitchen until my fingernails dug into the wood. They weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting the timeline. They were presenting Sloane not as a mistress, but as a savior, a professional equal. And the mother of the heir, I was just the dusty prologue they were waiting to tear out of the book. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Dana. "We are outside. The process server is in position. The deputies are with him. Give the signal." I took a deep breath. I looked at the remote in my hand. Grant walked to the center of the room. He tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The sharp ding-ding-ding cut through the chatter. The room went silent. "If I could have everyone's attention," Grant announced, his voice booming with charisma. He stood on the raised hearth of the fireplace. Looking down at the crowd, Marlene stood on his right, beaming. Sloane stood on his left, looking demure yet triumphant. "Tonight is about celebration," Grant began. "We are celebrating my wonderful mother, Marlene, who has been the rock of this family. But we are also celebrating a new chapter. This past year has been hard. We faced financial headwinds. There were moments I didn't think the company would survive." He paused for dramatic effect. He looked at me. For a brief second, his eyes met mine across the room. There was no love in them. Only a cold warning. Stay in your place. "But," Grant continued, turning his gaze to Sloane, "we found a way through, thanks to the incredible financial guidance of Sloane Whitney and the unwavering support of my mother. We have secured the capital to expand. We are stronger than ever. So, I want to propose a toast. To the women who actually stand by me. To the future." "To the future," the crowd echoed. Raising their glasses, I watched them drink. I watched Marlene squeeze Sloane's hand, I watched Grant smile the smile of a man who believes he has gotten away with murder. They thought they were the chess masters. They thought I was just a piece to be sacrificed to protect the king. They didn't realize that while they were playing for social status, I was playing for blood. I stepped out of the kitchen. I didn't walk with the nervous shuffle Grant expected. I walked with a spine of steel. I moved through the crowd, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the stares at my ugly dress. I walked until I was standing near the AV table. Grant saw me. His smile faltered. His eyes widened slightly. He made a subtle shooing motion with his hand, trying to wave me back to the shadows. I didn't move. "Harper," Grant said, his voice tight. "We are in the middle of a toast." "I know," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the room, it carried. "I have a toast too, Grant, and I prepared a little presentation to go with it." "Not now." "Harper," Marlene hissed, stepping forward. "Go back to the kitchen." "No," I said. I raised the remote control. I looked at Grant, then at Marlene, then at Sloane. I wanted to remember their faces exactly like this. Arrogant, safe, victorious, because in 5 seconds, this version of them would cease to exist. I pressed the button. The lights in the room dimmed automatically. The music cut out, and on the massive 10-foot LED screen behind Grant, the slideshow began. But it wasn't pictures of Marlene's birthday cakes. It was a screenshot of a text message. "Grant, once the cash clears, I serve her the papers. She'll be out of the house by the weekend." The room gasped. It was a collective, sucked-in breath that sucked the oxygen right out of the air. Grant froze. He turned around slowly. Looking at the screen, I didn't tremble. I didn't look away. The trap had snapped shut. The mouse was dead. It was time for the cat to eat. The silence that followed the appearance of that text message on the giant LED screen was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. A vacuum where the air is sucked out of the room before the explosion hits. The clinking of champagne glasses stopped. The polite chatter died. 50 pairs of eyes were glued to the 10-foot image of Grant's cruelty, pixelated and glowing in high definition. I stepped out from behind the audiovisual table and walked toward the fireplace. My beige, shapeless dress no longer felt like a costume of defeat. It felt like judicial robes. Grant was the first to react. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under the heat of the spotlight. He lunged toward the stage, his eyes wild. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Harper, get down from there! You are drunk!" He reached for me, his hand outstretched to grab my arm and drag me off the raised hearth. But he never made it. From the crowd, a wall of bodies materialized. My father, Arthur, whom I had secretly let in through the back garden gate 10 minutes prior, stepped forward. Beside him stood Noah, my cousin, and 2 of my larger male cousins who had driven down from Cleveland. They didn't say a word. They just formed a human barricade between me and my husband. Grant slammed into my father's chest and bounced back. "Arthur, what are you doing? She is humiliating us." "She is finishing it," my father said. His voice was calm, deep, and utterly terrifying. "And you are going to listen." I picked up the microphone from the stand. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke with the level, detached tone of a news anchor reporting a fatality. "My gift to this family," I said, my voice echoing through the surround sound speakers, "is the truth." I pressed the button on the remote. The screen went black for a second, and then the audio filled the room. It was the recording I had made yesterday, amplified so that every scratchy breath was audible. "The money is in the system." Marlene's voice boomed over the speakers. It was unmistakable, arrogant, sharp, and dismissive. "The sweep will trigger by Friday morning. Sloane checks the offshore balance every hour. Once that money lands in the Cayman account, we are done." The crowd gasped. Marlene, who had been standing frozen by the punch bowl, let out a strangled sound. She looked around frantically, realizing that her neighbors, her bridge club members, and her pastor were all listening to her conspire to commit grand larceny. The recording continued. Give her a week. She has parents. Let her crawl back to them. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. Now, it displayed the bank records Elena had given me. The text was large enough for everyone to read. Standing order. Sweep to Sloan R. Whitney. Date. January 27th. Amount, $1 million. This is the sweep order, I explained, looking directly at the senior partners of Grant's firm. Grant told you that Sloan Whitney was brought on to save the company. The truth is, Sloan Whitney is a forensic accountant specializing in hiding assets. She is not here to fix the business. She is here to launder my life savings into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Henderson, the investor, turned to look at Sloan. His face was purple with rage. Sloan, who had been preening moments ago, now looked like a trapped animal. She took a step back, clutching her stomach, trying to use her pregnancy as a shield. "It is a lie!" Sloan shrieked. "She photoshopped it." "I did not," I said calmly, "and I did not Photoshop this, either." Click. The screen changed to the property deeds Noah had pulled. "This is the quit-claim deed for this house," I said. Dated October 15th. Grant told me I was signing a liability waiver for a business loan. Instead, he tricked me into signing away my ownership of my own home. He transferred it to the Crow Family Trust. He stole my house. He stole my land. And he stole my credit. I looked at Grant. He was standing alone now. Even his mother had backed away from him. He looked small. He looked pathetic. "You wanted to rewrite the story, Grant," I said. "You wanted to introduce your new wife and your new life. Well, here they are. Everyone can see them." Grant opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to threaten, but the sound of sirens cutting through the evening air stopped him. Blue and red lights flashed against the large bay windows, washing the room in the colors of the law. The front door opened, and Dana Kessler walked in. She was flanked by 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies and a process server. She looked like an avenging angel in a tailored suit. "Grant Thomas," Dana announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Marlene Crow, Sloan Whitney." She pointed to the process server, who walked forward and thrust thick envelopes into their hands. "You are hereby served with a temporary restraining order and an emergency asset freeze," Dana said. "All accounts associated with Holloway and Finch, the Crow Family Trust, and your personal holdings are now under the control of the court. We are also serving notice of a lawsuit for fraudulent conveyance, spousal fraud, and conspiracy." Sloan dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound like a gunshot. "I am leaving," she stammered, turning toward the patio doors. "I am not involved in this. I am just an employee." "Actually, Ms. Whitney," one of the deputies said, stepping into her path, "we have a warrant to seize your electronic devices as part of an ongoing investigation into money laundering. You are going to need to stay right here." Sloan crumpled. The facade of the confident, wealthy career woman dissolved, leaving behind a scared grifter who knew she had been caught. Grant looked at the papers in his hand. He looked at the screen, where his own text messages were still glowing. "She'll be out of the house by the weekend." He looked at me. "Harper," he whispered. "Babe, please, we can fix this." I stared at him. I remembered the way he had looked at me in the kitchen, calculating how to steal the last of my dignity. I remembered the coldness of the bank. "There is no we, Grant," I said, "and I am not your babe. I am the plaintiff." I handed the microphone to my father. I didn't stay to watch them cry. I didn't stay to hear Marlene scream that it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't need to. The court of public opinion had already returned its verdict, and the court of law was just getting started. I walked through the crowd. People parted from me like the Red Sea. They didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with fear and respect. I walked out the front door, past the police cars, and into the cool night air. I had walked into that house a victim. I walked out a survivor. Epilogue. 6 months later, the bell above the door chimed, signaling a customer. I looked up from the arrangement of hydrangeas and white roses I was trimming. "Welcome to Harbor and Bloom," I said, smiling. The shop was small, located in a quiet corner of the city, but it was mine. Every inch of it, from the reclaimed wood floors to the skylights, was paid for with the settlement money. The divorce had been finalized last week. It was brutal, but short. With the mountain of evidence I had provided, Grant's lawyers had advised him to settle immediately to avoid prison time. He had given me everything: the remaining equity, the savings, and a significant portion of his future earnings, just to keep me from pressing criminal charges. I took it. I didn't need him in jail. I just needed him to be nothing to me. Marlene had moved to a small condo in Florida, shunned by her social circle. Sloan had turned state's witness against her former employers in Chicago to avoid prosecution for the fraud scheme she ran with Grant. Grant was living in a rented apartment, working a mid-level sales job, his reputation in the city completely destroyed. I finished wrapping the bouquet in brown paper and handed it to the young man at the counter. "For your wife?" I asked. "Yes," he said, looking nervous. "It is our anniversary. Treat her well," I said softly. "Partnership is precious." He paid and left. I walked to the window and flipped the sign to closed. I looked out at the street. It was raining again, a soft, cleansing rain, for the first time in 10 years. I wasn't afraid of the storm. I wasn't wondering what I had done wrong. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I went to the back room, picked up my bag, and locked the door. I had a dinner date with myself, a good book, and a bed that belonged only to me. I had lost a marriage, but I had found the person who had been missing for a decade, myself. And as I walked into the rain, I realized that was the only victory that really mattered. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below sharing your location and your thoughts on Grant and Marlene's karma. If you enjoyed watching Justice Served, please make sure to subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.